بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا دائم الفضل على البرية، يا باسط اليدين بالعطية، يا صاحب المواهب الصنيعة، صل على محمد وآله خير الورى سجيا، واغفر لنا يا ذا العلا في هذه العشية. صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم إني أسألك برحمتك التي وسعت كل شيء، وبقوتك التي قهرت بها كل شيء، وخضع لها كل شيء، وظل لها كل شيء، وبجبروتك التي غلبت بها كل شيء، وبعزتك التي لا يقوم لها شيء، وبعظمتك التي ملأت كل شيء، وبسلطانك الذي على كل شيء، وبوجهك الباقي بعد فناء كل شيء، وبأسمائك التي ملأت أركان كل شيء، وبعلمك الذي أحاط بكل شيء، وبنور وجهك الذي أضاله كل شيء. يا نور يا قدوس، يا نور يا قدوس، يا نور يا أول الأولين ويا آخر الآخرين. اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تهتك العصام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل النقام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تغيرئ النعام، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تحبس الدعاء، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تقطع الرجاء، اللهم اغفر لي الذنوب التي تنزل البلاء، اللهم اغفر لي كل ذنب أذنبته وكل خطيئة أخطأتها. اللهم إني أتقرب إليك بذكرك، واستشفع بك إلى نفسك، وأسألك بجودك أن تدنئني من قربك، وأن توزعني شكرك، وأن تلهمني ذكرك. اللهم إني أسألك سؤالا خاضع متذلل خاشع أن تصامحني وترحمني وتجعلني بقسمك راضيا قانعا، وفي جميع الأحوال متواضعا. اللهم وأسألك سؤال من اشتدت فاقته وأنزل بك عند الشدائد حاجة، وعظم فيما عندك رغبته. اللهم عظم سلطانك وعلى مكانك، وخفي مكرك وظهر أمرك، وغلب قهرك وجرت قدرتك، ولا يمكن الفرار من حكومتك. اللهم لا أجد لذنوبي غافرا، ولا لقبائحي ساترا، ولا لشيء من عملي القبيح بالحسن مبدلا غيرك. لا إله إلا أنت سبحانك وبحمدك ظلمت نفسي ظلمت وتجرحت بجهلي، وسكنت إلى قديم ذكرك لي ومنك علي. اللهم مولاي، كم من كبيح سترت، وكم من فادح من البلاء عقلت، وكم من عثار وقيت، وكم من مكروه دفعت، وكم من ثناء جميل لست أهلا له نشرته. اللهم أعظم بلائي وأفرط بي سوء حالي، وقصرت بي أعمالي، وقعدت بي أغلالي، وحبسني عن نفعي بعد آمالي، وخدعتني الدنيا بغرورها، ونفسي بخيانتها، ومطالي يا سيدي، فأسألك بعزتك أن لا يحجب عنك دعائي سوء عملي وفعالي، ولا تفضحني بخفي ما اطلعت عليه من سري، ولا تعاجلني بالعقوبة على ما عملته في خلواتي من سوء فعلي وإساءتي، ودوام تفريطي وجهالتي، وكثرة شحواتي وغفلتي. وكن اللهم بعزتك لي في كل الأحوال رؤوفا، وعلي في جميع الأمور عطوفا. إلهي وربي، من لي غيرك؟ أسأله كشف ضري والنظر في أمري، إلهي ومولاي، أجريت علي حكما اتبعت فيه هوى نفسي، ولم أحترس فيه من تزيين عدوي، فغرني بما أهوى وأسعده على ذلك القضاء، فتجاوزت بما جرى علي من ذلك بعد حدودك، وخالفت بعض أوامرك، فلك الحجة علي في جميع ذلك، ولا حجة لي فيما جرى علي فيه قضاؤك، وألزمني حكمك وبلاؤك. وقد أتيتك يا إلهي بعد تقصيري وإسرافي على نفسي، معتذرا نادما منكسرا مستقيلا مستغفرا منيبا مقرا مذعنا معترفا، لا أجد مفرا مما كان مني، ولا مفزعا أتوجه إليه في أمري، غير قبولك عذري وإدخالك إياي في ساعة من رحمتك. اللهم فاقبل عذري وارحم شدة ضري، وفكني من شدي وفاقي. يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني، يا رب ارحم ضعف بدني ورقة جلدي ودقة عظمي، يا من بدأ خلقي وذكري وتربيتي وبري وتقضيتي، هبني لابتداء كرمك وصال في برك بي، يا إلهي وسيدي وربي أتراك مؤذبي بنارك بعد توحيدك، وبعد من طوى عليه قلبي من معرفتك، ولهج به لساني من ذكرك، وأتقده ضميري من حبك، وبعد صدق اعترافي ودعائي خاضعا لربوبيتك، هيهات أنت أكرم من أن تضيع من ربيته، أو تبعد من أدنيت، أو تشرد من عاويت، أو تسلم إلى البلاء من خفيته ورحمته. وليت شعري يا سيدي وإلهي ومولاي، أتسلط النار على وجوه خرت لعظمتك ساجدا، وعلى ألسن نطقت بتوحيدك صادقا وبشكرك معدحا، وعلى قلوب اعترفت بإلهيتك محققا، وعلى ضمائر حوت من العلم بك حتى صارت خاشعة، وعلى جوارح صعت إلى أوطان تعبدك طائعة، وأشارت باستغفارك مذعنة. ما هكذا الظن بك، ولا أخبرنا بفضلك عنك يا كريم يا رب. وأنت تعلم ضعفي عن قليل من بلاء الدنيا وعقوباتها، وما يجري فيها من المكاره على أهلها، على أن ذلك بلاء ومكروه قليل مكثور، يصير بقاء قصير مدة. فكيف احتمالي لبلاء الآخرة وجليل الوقوع المكاره فيها، وهو بلاء تطول مدته ويدوم مقامه ولا يخفف عن أهله، لأنه لا يكون إلا عن غضبك وانتقامك وسخطك، وهذا ما لا تقوم له السماوات والأرض. يا سيدي يا سيدي، فكيف بي وأنا عبدك الضعيف الضليل الحقير المسكين المستكين. يا إلهي وربي وسيدي ومولاي، لأي الأمور إليك أشكو، ولما منها أذج وأبكي، لعليم العذاب وشدتي أم لطول البلاء ومدتي. فلئن صيرتني للعقوبات مع أعدائك، وجمعت بيني وبين أهل بلائك، وفرقت بيني وبين أحبائك وأوليائك، فهبني يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي وربي، صبرت على عذابك، فكيف أصبر على فراقك؟ وهمني صبرت على حر نارك، فكيف أصبر عن النظر إلى كرامتك؟ أم كيف أسكن في النار ورجائي عفوك؟ فبعزتك يا سيدي ومولاي أقسم صادقا، لئن تركتني ناطقا لأذجن إليك بين أهلها ذجيج العاملين، ولأصرخن إليك صراخ المستسرقين، ولأبكين عليك بكاء الفاقدين، ولأنادينك أين كنت يا ولي المؤمنين. يا غاية آمال العارفين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث المستغيثين، يا غياث يا حبيب قلوب الصادقين، ويا إله العالمين. أفتراك سبحانك يا إلهي وبحمدك تسمع فيها صوت عبد مسلم سجن فيها بمخالفته، وضاق طعم عذابها بمعصيته، وحبس بين أطباقها وجرمه بجرمه وجريرته، وهو يضج إليك ضجيجا مؤمل لرحمتك، ويناديك بلسان أهل توحيدك، ويتوسل إليك بربوبيتك. يا مولاي، فكيف يبقى في العذاب وهو يرجو ما سلف من حلمك؟ أم كيف تؤلمه النار وهو يعمل فضلك ورحمتك؟ أم كيف يحرقه لهيبها وأنت تسمع صوته وترى مكانه؟ أم كيف يشتمل عليه زفيرها وأنت تعلم ضعفا؟ أم كيف يتقلقل بين أطباقها وأنت تعلم صدقا؟ أم كيف تزجره زبانيتها وهو يناديك يا رباه؟ أم كيف يرجو فضلك في عتقه منها فتتركه فيها؟ هيهات ما ذلك الظن بك، ولا المعروف من فضلك، ولا مشبه لما عاملت به الموحدين من برك وإحسانك. فباليقين أقطع لولا ما حكمت به من تعظيم جاحدك وقضيت به من إخلاد معانديك، لجعلت النار كلها بردا وسلاما، وما كان لأحد فيها مقرا ولا مقاما، لكنك تقدست أسماؤك أقسمت أن تملأها من الكافرين من الجنة والناس أجمعين، وأن تخلد فيها المعاندين، وأن تجل ثناؤك قلت مبتدئا وتطولت بالإنعام متكرما. أفمن كان مؤمنا كمن كان فاسقا لا يستوون. إلهي وسيدي، فأسألك بالقدرة التي قدرتها وبالقضية التي حتمتها وحكمت وغلبت من عليه أجريتها، أن تهب لي في هذه الليلة وفي هذه الساعة كل جرم أجرمته وكل ذنب أذنبت وكل قبيح أصررت وكل جهل عملت، كتمته أو أعلنت، أخفيته أو أظهرت، وكل سيئة أمرت بإثباتها الكرام الكاتبين الذين وكلتهم بحفظ ما يكون مني، وجعلتهم شهودا علي مع جوارحي، وكنت أنت الرقيب علي من ورائهم والشاهد لما خفي عنهم، وبرحمتك أخفيت وبفضلك سترت، وأن توفر حظي من كل خير تنزل أو إحسان تفضل أو بر تنشر أو رزق تبسط أو ذنب تغفر أو خطأ تستر. يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا إلهي وسيدي ومولاي ومالك رقي، يا من بيده ناصيتي، يا عليما بضري ومسكنتي، يا خبيرا بفقري وفاقتي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، أسألك بحقك وقدسك وأعظم صفاتك وأسمائك أن تجعل أوقاتي في الليل والنهار بذكرك معمورا وبخدمتك موصولا، وأعمالي عندك مقبولا، حتى تكون أعمالي وأورادي كلها وردا واحدا، وحالي في خدمتك سرمدا. يا سيدي يا من عليه مؤولي، يا من إليه شكوت أحوالي، يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، يا ربي يا ربي يا ربي يا رب، قو قوي على خدمتك جوارحي، واشدود على العزيمة جوانحي، وهب لي الجد في خشيتك والدوام في الاتصال بخدمتك، حتى أسرح إليك في ميادين السابقين، وأسرع إليك في المبادرين، وأشتاق إلى قربك في المشتاقين، وأدنو منك دنو المخلصين، وأخافك مخافة الموقنين، وأجتمع في جوارك مع المؤمنين. اللهم ومن أرادني بسوء فأرد، ومن كادني فكد، واجعلني من أحسن عبيدك نصيبا عندك، وأقربهم منزلة منك، وأخصهم زلفة لديك، فإنه لا ينال ذلك إلا بفضلك. وجد لي بجودك، وعطف علي بمجدك، واحفظني برحمتك، واجعل لساني بذكرك لهجا، وقلبي بحبك متيما، ومن علي بحسن إجابتك، وأقلني عثرتي، واغفر زلتي، فإنك قضيت على عبادك بعبادتك، وأمرتهم بدعائك، وضمنت لهم الإجابة. فإليك يا ربي نصبت وجهي، وإليك يا ربي مددت يدي، فبعزتك استجب لي دعائي، وبلغني مناي، ولا تقطع من فضلك رجائي، واكفني شر الجن والإنس من أعدائي. يا سريع الرضا، يا سريع الرضا، يا رضا، اغفر لمن لا يملك إلا الدعاء، فإنك فعال لما تشاء. يا من اسمه دواء، وذكره شفاء، وطاعته غنى، ارحم من رأس ماله الرجاء، وسلاه البكاء. يا سابغ النعام، يا دافع النقام، يا نور المستوحشين في الظلام، يا عالما لا يعلم، صل على محمد وآل محمد، وافعل بي ما أنت أهله. وصلى الله على رسوله والأئمة الميامين من آله، وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. إذا أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات، سورة المباركة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you again for joining us on this Thursday night. And without further ado, I would like to invite Sheikh up to the member with the loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Before we begin, let's recite Surah Al-Fatiha for the following individuals, inshallah. Sister Maymanat Khan, Sister Adrian Khan, Ghulam Noor Muhammad, Maryam Qasim Ali, Zainab Bai Giwala, and Ahmad Ali Qasim Ali. Please recite Fatiha ma salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad آل محمد وأجل فرجهم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. This week we're going to talk about one of the prophets of God that, even though we might not agree, was born during this exact time. But for us Muslims, plays a very important role. And I think that we should be able to, inshallah, talk more about this prophet of Islam, that his name occurs about 24 times in the Quran. Isa ibn Maryam, Jesus alayhi salam, and about 35 times in first person, 48 times in third person in the Quran. And for us Muslims, Isa alayhi salam is a very important figure. And we must acquaint ourselves with the teachings of Isa alayhi salam. And a lot of these sayings of what he did and how he lived is through traditions of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. When you look at some of the works that are out there and the way that Ahlul Bayt and the family of the Prophet, they were able to preserve the legacy and life of the prophets before them. Because Ahlul Bayt, the family of the Prophet, are Warathul Anbiya. They're the inheritors of the Anbiya. So that wisdom that you want to get from the teachings of the prophets and what happened, and some of the stories you see are inside the Quran. And what are the explanations? What are the details? Because the Quran, some stories it goes into more detail. Some stories it is shorter. But the ahadith, the narrations from the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt, they begin to elaborate more on what happened exactly. And there are many things that are inside the Bible that you don't have the answer of. What happened to, for example, certain parts of Isa's life, for example, is a mystery. But some of the ahadith mentions this. So therefore, we're going to go over the life and legacy of Isa alayhi salam and learn from lessons from his life. We talked about wisdom and we talked about becoming wise. And one of the ways to become wise is to learn from the lives of wise people and insan al-kamil, those perfect human beings. Isa alayhi salam, when he was born, you see that he is born without a father. And the fact that this has been done, just how Adam alayhi salam was created, this already set the situation for people to take this miracle of God into something that, if they go too far in extreme, would cause misguidance. And that is believing that the divinity of Jesus alayhi salam, that he is divine. So when you study the life of Isa alayhi salam, and you have actually one of the statements of Satan, when he's born, he is looking around and seeing, according to a hadith, that someone is born and is looking at the angels, and then he has a vow. And we have in Bihar this hadith that he swears he will misguide 4/5 of all humanity through him. Why? Because he was not born without a father, and that he would be able to deceive people and to be able to trick people to say, okay, because he doesn't have a father. And later on, you'll see the miracles of Isa alayhi salam, because he lived in a situation where there was a epidemic. Many people were sick, and he cured many people. So they would take this, and they would give those divine attributes to Jesus alayhi salam. So you see that Satan makes a vow in hadith, 4/5 of humanity, I will be able to misguide them. So there's two things that I want to mention here before we start. One is this, is that the hadith, as Muslims, as followers of Quran and Sunnah, we believe in the perfection of religion through Prophet and Ahlul Bayt. So the first thing is we love Isa alayhi salam, and you seek nearness to Isa alayhi salam, to God. But how is this done? Through the hadith that we have, through the verses of Quran that we have. We're able to realize how important of a figure he is. Two, another thing that I want you brothers and sisters to study and think about tonight is this, is that when you see these stories, when you see these actual realities, some of them are in the Quran, and the Quran is qat'i as-sudur, it's 100%. Some of it is in a hadith. Even if it's in hadith, then you would have to look at the sanad. You'd have to see, when you look at this book that we have about the lives of the prophets, and the author talks about this in the forward that we get before he starts the book, is that some of the hadith can be weak in narration. Some of the hadith you'd have to investigate. Even if you have a sahih hadith, when it comes to beliefs, it doesn't mean necessarily it is equal to yaqeen and certainty. The Quran is certainty because it comes from the source that is immaculate. It is a miracle itself. But the ahadith has probative force, has a hujjat for us. In fiqh, we give a fatwa on one hadith that's sahih, that's correct. But that doesn't necessarily mean that hadith causes you yaqeen and certainty. You would have to look at context. You would have to look at other hadith for you to have an ability to reach yaqeen. So the purpose of this book and these stories, when you see stories of the prophets besides the Quran, we don't have to necessarily believe in the detail of all of them unless you have that certainty. But you will say, yes, it is very probable, or you could say that I have done, this assumption that I have is correct. But because, as we said, unless not those stories in the Quran, but those stories that are in a hadith and the details out there, it is for us lessons to learn, and not necessarily does all of it have to be 100% true. So we have to keep that mind, that frame, that mentality when you approach the stories of the prophets that are not in the Quran. The second thing that you learn from the life of Isa alayhi salam, before we begin his miraculous life, because he did have an exceptional amount of miracles. When you look at his life, one of them is curing the sick. In hadith, we have that thousands of people sometimes would come to Isa alayhi salam and get cured. Thousands. And when he would cure them, he would also invite them to the path of God. You have in hadith that he would give life in the Quran too. He would give life to those that were dead. How hard is it? Okay, you cure somebody. Okay, you cure thousands. Okay, they're blind. There's, leprosy, different diseases. Okay, but then when somebody is dead, how do you give him life again? And the occurrences in hadith, in Shia hadith, about a person, for example, even one of the Prophet's sons, Prophet Nuh's sons, Shem, he gives him life again, he comes back, and he has a conversation with him in hadith, Isa alayhi salam, and asks him, do you want to come back to this world? And he does not want to come back to this world. He says the pain of death, and for him it had a pain in his abdomen or stomach area. He says, I do not want that to be repeated. I am much more comfortable. I'm better where I am now. Let me be. But there are others we have, and inshallah, if there's time, I'll give you examples where Prophet Isa alayhi salam gave him life. You have creation with the permission of God, and those specific attributes that are divine attributes, the Quran specifically repeats that with the permission of God, with the permission of God. So he gives life to a bird. Right? So you see miracles and miracles. Giving a food from heaven, or in the hadith doesn't have from heaven or from this world, from God, miraculous food. What type of food was it? We'll mention, the hadith says a type of fish that he gives, and multiple people, hundreds, possibly 1,000 people eat from this fish, and it's in the same shape and form as it used to be. So feeding people with a fish that came from God. And of course, his biggest miracle is being born without a father. When you think of these stories, and when you study the lives of the prophets, the Quran is meant for us to be able to take us to the next step. And it's providing us a stepping stone from learning about Jesus alayhi salam to learning about our Imams and Ahlul Bayt. And we talked about wisdom in Fatimiyya. Wisdom is this, that you set somebody, you put things in the right place to achieve maximum benefit. So Isa alayhi salam is brought out there, these stories, because Allah is wise. So when you read these, and you see that, Imam Musa Qadim alayhi salam did this miracle, or Imam Ali ibn Musa did this miracle, or Imam Ali did this miracle, or the Prophet of Islam. Some of our Sunni brothers have gathered about 1,000 miracles of the Prophet of Islam, 4,000 miracles of the Prophet of Islam. This shouldn't be something for us far-fetched. That the basis of all of this is the Holy Quran. Can you deny the miracles of Jesus? You're denying the Holy Quran. Because there are verses. Ikhbarul ghayb of Isa alayhi salam is in the Quran. And I talked about this before, of what you eat, what you store in your homes. Isa alayhi salam said, I will tell you, I'll tell that information. So do you have anything higher than this? Creation from mud into a clay, into a bird? Creation, giving life? Someone that's dead, maybe thousands of years ago, giving him life and having conversation with him? Or for example, you see born without a father, alayhi salam, and the miracle of being saved by God and being raised and not being crucified, that Allah saved him. And it says in hadith, with 9,000 angels he ascended. What does this set us up for, this belief? When Isa alayhi salam is in the sky, raised in the sky and preserved. So then when you think of the Imam of the age, and you say, well, which one is harder, to be saved and be in the sky, or to live a life like the life of Nuh alayhi salam in this world? So it's easier to live in this world and be preserved than to be in the sky and to come back. So you see, all these miracles for us are a purpose. Especially the time of that of Isa alayhi salam, he performed all these miracles, And he was the seal of the prophets for the Israelites. 600 prophets around that Allah sent for the Israelites. He was the last of them. And it's unfortunate, that in this society, as Muslims, we'll talk about maybe, later on, that the stance we have as Muslims for Christmas should be, my limited knowledge, should be in a way that we do not give the notion or assumption that we do not like Isa. Because there are some that they did not accept Isa. Some religions, they don't accept him, na'udhu billah. They say that he was not a prophet, that he lied, na'udhu billah. We don't want to be in society like that to say that, even though we don't accept, some aspects of Christmas, some of it from pagans, even those that study, they say there's no evidence that Isa alayhi salam was born in the winter, but fine, because it is a day that, it's the remembrance of Prophet Isa. We cannot be that extreme that you're so against Christmas in such a way that they think that you don't believe in Jesus alayhi salam. You have to show that I believe in Isa alayhi salam. He's a prophet of God, and if I do not believe in him, I have not believed in the Quran. But then there's another extreme that some have, and that is with the occurrences and the holidays that happen throughout the year. They make it in such a way as if they're promoting Christianity or accepting Christianity, or that they bring Christmas so high that their kids that are being raised in this culture, when it comes to Ghadir and it comes to other holidays, for them those are secondary because they got so many gifts, they got so many the holidays that they have, and looking for that Christmas miracle in the morning of Christmas. That Ghadir for them is not a miracle anymore, or the waladat of the imams is not a place of celebration, or Eid al-Adha, Eid al-Fitr. So we can't be extreme when it comes to Christmas in a way that, na'udhu billah, as you see in some areas of town. I was driving yesterday, you see there's no lights whatsoever. And you see that they're not, obviously there's actually Jewish part of town. They do not celebrate at all because, na'udhu billah, they don't, they say Jesus alayhi salam was not a prophet, was not a person from God. So in such a way, I'm not saying to put lights or whatever, I'm not saying, but that approach that we have towards Christmas should not be extreme. We even have stories of Imam Khomeini when he was in France of giving Christmas gifts, to the Christians. Why? To show that me as a religious figure, people don't know this. They don't know how much you love Isa alayhi salam. And those that are a lot of people that have become Muslim, they say, I have connected to Jesus better through Islam. That's what Islam is, to connect better to Jesus, because you're connecting to him through the reality of Isa alayhi salam. So therefore, Isa alayhi salam is a very important figure for us, especially when Imam Mahdi comes. And how important it is to allow people, especially in this land, that when Imam Mahdi comes back, we believe he'll come back with Isa alayhi salam, with Jesus. And together, Satan will be killed, inshallah. Where was Jesus alayhi salam born? So this is some of the things that is interesting, that in his hadith, as I said, you cannot say 100% unless from these four, narrations or number of narrations, you get certainty, basically. Where was Isa alayhi salam born? What land was he born? Because we know that he went to a distant land, is how the Quran has. The Quran has distant land. But where was he born? What land was it? So you study and you look at the hadith and the narrations, and you see that Isa alayhi salam, in one hadith we have in Bihar, is that he was traveled, and miraculously a distant land, he was born in the city of Karbala. It wasn't a city back then, but in the land of Karbala we have one narration that he was born in Karbala. Christians say Bethlehem, but when you look at distant place, as how the author of this book has, is about 6 miles. 6 miles is not a distant place. Even back then, to walk 6 miles or to travel, that's not much. For us today, 6 miles is nothing. So that's not a distant place. One hadith we have is Karbala. Second hadith we have, she gave birth next to the Euphrates. And Euphrates is not towards Bethlehem and Jerusalem, because when we say Bethlehem, we know that his mother Maryam was in Jerusalem. So that's, very close. So we would not say it's Bethlehem. Third hadith we have, it was in the orchards of Kufa, around Kufa. Another hadith we have is around Baghdad, so in Iraq. And this was a distant land, and miraculously he was sent there. And then he was brought back miraculously, and he spoke in Jerusalem. He spoke to the people. So you have, even when he was born, he was sent far away in Iraq, and then came back in hadith. There's 4 hadith. Vow of silence. Then Isa alayhi salam, his mother is worried. And when they are sent back, actually, let me mention this first. Right when he is born, one of the first things that he has, that statement you have in the Quran, that statement, one of the problems we have is with the lives of the Prophet, when you study them, when you say throughout the Quran or Hadith, it's not in chronological order. So you have to study this from the books of ulama and scholars, and like books I have here, emissaries of God's emissaries. They put things in chronological order, from Adam, Isa is the last section. And what happened in some of the stories in the Quran, they're not necessarily in chronological order. You have to figure that out yourself. Is it Allah's wisdom to put, a story here in this chapter, a part of the other story here. Sometimes the story repeats in another chapter. That's okay. That's, for us to recite the Quran, to learn for it and get maximum benefit. It's not a book of history. It's not a book of fiqh or jurisprudence. It's a book of awakening us up and learning from these examples of the prophets. So Isa alayhi salam, one of the first things he mentions to his mother is that your Lord has made a spring flow to your feet. When Jesus alayhi salam, was born from the ground, he mentions that there will be a spring from your feet. Shake the trunk of the date in hadith, palm toward yourself, and it will drop fresh dates. Eat, drink, and be comforted. Immediately he comforts his mother alayhi salam right when he was born to eat, from dates. And there's a spring, and the miraculously a spring was under the feet of Lady Maryam alayhi salam. And then it's time for them, they come back. They come back to Jerusalem. And Isa alayhi salam, this is his idea from Allah, that he tells his mother to have a vow of silence and say, Mary rose with baby in hand, ready to return. Jesus spoke to her again as a baby and says, if you see any person say, I hereby make a vow to all the all beneficent to maintain silence. So you see the hikmah of Isa alayhi salam as a baby, saying have a fasting of silence. We don't have that now, but to say, this is what I'm doing. So when you read stories like this, and you have imamat at a young age, and hikmah at such a young age, it's not far-fetched for you. This is setting you up to understand that Allah will give hikmah and wisdom to whoever He wants. When you look at the bee, for example, and the bee produces honey, shafa, when you see that it makes a home in such a way that honey is stored there. This is all from wahi of Allah. This is all from the knowledge of Allah. If Allah can give knowledge to a bee, why can I not give knowledge to a human? So we have to understand this is, in a certain way, this is wahi or inspiration. This is knowledge from God. If God can give knowledge to a bee, He can give it to a human. So therefore, you see that all these miraculous events, especially as followers of Ahlul Bayt, for us are very important because it's allowing us to understand wilayat takwini, wilayat of the Imams, that the Imams, for them to have, with the permission of Allah. We said wilayat is of 2 types. One is independent, that is the power of God. But the other is with permission of God. That with permission of God, you have power over the universe. You have knowledge of unseen knowledge that others don't have. This is not something that is far-fetched. It's giving very clearly to Isa alayhi salam. Wisdom was given to Isa alayhi salam. And then we continue. You see that Jesus alayhi salam speaks. And this is, from the verse of the Quran, when He comes to them, I am a servant of God. He has given me the book and made me a prophet. He has made me blessed wherever I may be. And He has exhorted me to pray and give charity as long as I live, and to be good to my mother, And one of the first things, Isa alayhi salam, and you see, how much importance all religions give to parents, especially Islam, to be, to be good to my mother, right when he is a baby, as a child. And he has not made me a miserable tyrant to her. May God's peace be with me that day I was born, the day I die, and the day I am raised again to life, from the Quran, 19:30 and 33. And then different religions, they come, they know, they understand just how Satan understood that an important person was born. Different people, Zoroastrians come, and they gazed from the stars, and they came to Jerusalem to understand that such a child was born, to come and see him. Because we said all these religions and true religions are connected together. All these prophets were sent, they're connected together. And you see that Isa alayhi salam starts as a childhood. He goes back. We have that, some of the era that where was Jesus at such a time period. We have in Hadith, the first 7 years, he goes back to Iraq. We have in Hadith. And some type, and he was in a plateau with a place of, to stay there, and fresh water. And that some of these years also he was in Egypt. So he was sent with 600, he was the seal of the messengers, and he begins to cure the sick. Now he is performing miracles. Isa alayhi salam is performing miracles before he's going to talk to them about his mission. And people see, some days thousands of people would come. And he brings, we said, Shem to life. One of Isa's friends, we see this story. Jesus had a friend whom he had been accustomed to visiting regularly. He was unable to visit him for a while. This is from Hadith. And when he went to visit him again, the friend's mother said he had died. So one of his friends died. Jesus asked her if she would like to see her son again. Would you like to see your son again? And she eagerly replied, yes, I would. He came the next day, and they went together to his grave. He prayed to God, and by his leave, his friend rose from the grave. When Jesus saw him and his mother weeping with joy, his heart went out to them. Maybe we should have this on Sunday, inshallah. For Sunday, this would be nicer, but it's Thursday night. He asked his friend if he would like to remain alive for another 20 years. So Shem didn't want to remain alive. This person that died, and his mother saw him, says, would you want to be alive for another 20 years and marry and have marriage and have children? He agreed, and he lived another 20 years. Then from all this healing, we're trying to also learn from Isa and learn from the lessons. You learn from one thing, that Isa alayhi salam cured so many people. But there's one person that he could not cure. Who can tell me who that is, you think? Who can Isa alayhi salam not cure? The Pharaoh? Close. It is the fool. The fool he cannot cure. So, as we said, hikmah, you learn, you want to be a hakim, study the lives of those that are wise. So once Jesus reflected on the miracles he had been able to perform, and his disciples said to him, and he said to his disciples, I have treated the sick and cured them by God's leave. I've cured the blind, those that have the leprous, those that have leprosy, skin disease and infectious skin disease, with a mere touch, some of them just with a mere touch. I've revived the dead by God's leave, by God's power, revived the dead. However, I have tried to cure the fool, but I have not been able to heal him. I could not cure the fool. His disciples asked, whom do you intend by this fool? Who is the fool? He replied, I mean him who admires himself, somebody that is arrogant, and his own opinion, some that's super opinionated, and he admires himself, who considers all obliged to him and himself obliged to no one. Everyone has to listen to me. I don't have to listen to anybody. And who considers all rights to be due to him. I have these rights. Don't talk bad about me, but I can talk bad about everyone. And to do him and due to him, while no rights are due to anyone, such is a fool for whom even I do not have right to cure. So the arrogant one, I cannot cure him. Then Isa alayhi salam, one of the another things that you see, he cured so many people, not the fool, the arrogant person. But when he was sick, he didn't just make a dua or just, touch himself and become cured. He actually went and made medicine for himself, you see in the hadith. He prepared an oil and honey and bitter herbs for himself. And so therefore, you see, this is how he cured himself. What can we learn from this story, from hadith? That, brothers and sisters, when you look at the pandemic now, some people view that in religious congregations or in religious places, there's no more room for cures or for the recommendations of doctors anymore, that you don't need them. This is religion now. This is spirituality. There's angels here. You don't need, to mask. You don't need vaccinations. You don't need, social distancing. But you see that Isa alayhi salam, just like Imam Ali, when he was hit, they brought a doctor for him. He didn't say, "Oh, go away, doctor. We don't believe in you. It's fake. Everything you're saying is fake news." They brought a doctor for Imam Ali, and Isa alayhi salam looked for a cure. We understand that we look at life in the reality as a wise person, and you look at physical cures and also spiritual cures. Don't be extreme in any way. Look for cures and solutions by the material world, and also look especially, and don't be extreme, just think only the cure is in material things. There's also cure in spiritual things. Enhance yourself in both of these things. Your mind and also your dua and your hands and in making dua. Just how Isa alayhi salam, he looked for a cure in hadith. He walked on water, we have in hadith. Isa alayhi salam in Shia hadith, he walked on water in the name of God. He said, Bismillah, in the name of God, with solid conviction, with yaqeen. The du'as that says here, in general, that if you want that dua to be answered, say it with conviction, not with doubt. Bismillah, and he walked on water. And he was able to walk on the surface. He had a friend, and his friend also in the same way began walking on water. But there was a problem here. The problem was that man was like, "Look, I'm walking on water." People can't, we call this zarfiyat, they don't have that capacity sometimes. Something, either they get really rich or famous and they lose. This person, he's doing miracles, he gets arrogant. He's like, oh. So he becomes overcome with a sense of conceit. He says, the Spirit of God walks on water and I walk on water. What merit does he have over me? I'm even probably, why is he doing it? I'm doing it too. Maybe I'm better than him. No sooner had he thought of this that he splashed beneath the surface and scrambled to grab a hold of Jesus to save his life. Jesus caught him and brought him safely to shore. He told the man, "You forgot your place and thought yourself better than you are. This is why God became angry with you and stripped you of your gifts. Repent to God." And he did, and God returned his gift back to him. So there's a lot of teachings, a lot of wisdom from Isa alayhi salam's life. And inshallah, we'll later on, we can talk about this, or that feast from heaven. There's a lot of details. But I want to go through some of the wise sayings of Isa alayhi salam and Shia narrations. We have a book from one of our professors that used to be a professor in the US, and he moved to Iran, Dr. Lugenhausen. And he teaches in an institute in Iran, as long as, I believe he's still there. And he has a translated book, Jesus Through Shia Narrations. And in this book, he has different hadith. Some of these hadith are from him in that book. Once God told Isa alayhi salam, "I do not forget those who forget me." God says, "I do not forget those who forget me. So how could I possibly forget those who remember me? I remember those that forget me." You see in this day and age that how many people are being protected by God. They're getting sustenance, they're getting protection, they're getting existence. Allah is taking care of them, and they don't, some of them are atheists, some of them are forgetful, They don't believe in God or they forget God. But Allah has God forgotten them? No. You see them, they have a good world. Some of them, they don't have religion, they have a good dunya. But how could I then forget those that remember me? If I haven't forgotten them, then those that remember me, how can I forget them? And I am not stingy with those who disobey me. So how could I possibly be stingy with those who obey me? So no matter what, remember that Allah loves you and Allah gives His grace to you, either you remember Him or not. So this causes us to be more, inshallah, remembering of God. Another wise saying of Isa a.s. slowly will come to an end. God has told him in hadith, this is in the same book, Jesus through Shia narrations, God has told him, it is ironic that by believing, my believing servant is saddened when I withhold worldly pleasure from him. Even though this is potentially what he is most beloved and nearest to me. This is when somebody is closest to me, when I withhold the worldly pleasures from him. It's ironic. Some people, something happens to them, or there's financial difficulties, say Allah doesn't love me anymore. But Allah says it's ironic. How come this person, he gets saddened by this? They don't realize that actually now he has a more taqarrub. He is closer to me now. And he exalts when I lay forth worldly pleasure for him, even though he is potentially, when he is the most despicable towards me and furthest from me. But now I give him world, I give him things he likes. And he thinks, oh Allah, akraman, in the Quran, he has done kiramat of me, he has been kind to me. But actually, now he's farther from me. So a lot of times, Isa alayhi salam in this world of wisdom is not that don't judge Allah loves you or not by how much you get in this world and how much you don't get. There's a time when some of the ulama, they were afraid. They were so pious when the world was too nice to them. They were afraid, pious people, like, oh, Allah is testing me. What's going on? Everything's working perfectly. They were afraid that they would forget God. And that, that taqarrub, that nearness to God would be away. But and a lot of times you see that when people this day and age, if they don't receive something in this world, they get upset with God. Even though this is a test for us. So this was a few, I know that we did start late, so I'm going to end with this last thing of wisdom, because we're talking about wisdom and hikmah. Isa alayhi salam says, wisdom is imparted through humility, not through pride. Just as plants grow in soft soil, not in rock. Plants grow in soft soil, a humble heart. If you are arrogant, you will not have hikmah. And the last, we'll talk a few things about Jesus' character. Jesus' behavior was impeccable. He never did anything the least bit reprehensible. He never turned away an orphan. He never laughed to boisterously. He never even has shooed a fly from his face. He never held his nose in aversion of a rotten smell for fear of offending the one who was responsible for it. He was an optimist and encouraged his companions to see the best in things. Once they passed by a rotting corpse of a dog, and his disciples exclaimed in disgust, "How rotten is this smell?" Jesus in hadith says, how brilliantly white are his teeth. But look at the teeth of this corpse. How great are these teeth? Optimistic, looking at the good things in life. And this is the last advice that we have, that you could look at in a way that if you're negative, you're always going to see everything negative. But to be optimistic and look at sometimes we might be tested and we overworked and underpaid, but you still enjoy your life. You still look at things and pleasures that Allah has for you and say, Alhamdulillah, and you're grateful. It is the night of Friday, and inshallah, we will remember Imam Hussein alayhi salam. In one of the hadith, it has that Isa alayhi salam cried for Imam Hussein. And he walked with his hawariyun, and this term is usually used for the disciple of Isa alayhi salam. He walked with his hawariyun in the land, And he mentioned that this is the land of Karbala, this is the land that the grandson of the son of the Prophet of Islam, the final messenger, will be slain. Isa alayhi salam was crying, and the Hawariyun were crying, and then when they heard this, possibly they're crying more. And then he said this statement, says, and his mother, the mother of Hussein, Ibn Ali, the mother of Hussein, is similar to my mother. Hadith. That Lady Fatima alayhi salam will be similar to Maryam. And both of them were, madluma, both of them were oppressed. Lady Maryam in a way that they made up things about her and accused her of the most greatest of sins. And Lady Fatima alayhi salam, the daughter of Rasulullah, her rights usurped, fadak taken away from her, her inheritance prohibited, the inheritance of her father. And that in such a way that when she spoke about fadak, nobody stood up from the people of Medina to protect her. But one of our ulama, Ayatollah Sadr, I believe, said that another woman in Islam spoke up and spoke to the people, and thousands of people joined her army. But Lady Zahra, Mathluma, 18, the daughter of Rasulullah, she spoke and nobody came, barely anybody came to her aid. Sallallahu alayki ya Abu Abdullah, sallallahu alayki ya Fatima Zahra. We ask Allah, inshallah, that I thank each and every one of you for coming. I know that it is the holidays, there's a lot of rain, and may Allah bless all of you. May Allah, inshallah, grant our hawa'ij, inshallah. May Allah cure all the sick. May Allah bless all those that have passed away. May Allah protect our iman, inshallah. May Allah give us wisdom. May Allah give us more connection and love to Isa alayhi salam, more knowledge of this great prophet of God. May we see him, inshallah, when he comes with Imam Mahdi, ajallahu ta'ala faraja. And inshallah, may Allah make us of their